All right, welcome to your next project. So this website is called Yavin, and I really like this site. I think it looks pretty professional. It's for a company that designs office spaces. So it's a bright theme, and we have our nav bar, which is very similar to some of the other ones we've done. We do have a scroll effect, so it'll have a white background that you can see through, and also a shadow, a large shadow at the bottom. Okay, and that's when you scroll. Then we have the hero slash header area with this image on the right, some text and buttons on the left. We also are going to position these circle background images. So we're going to position those, and you can see that when we make it smaller, they're going to change size as well. So we'll have some media queries for that. Then we have some stats here, happy customers, issue solved, etc. And we're going to add a little bit of JavaScript so that when we reload and we come to the page, it counts up from 0. Okay, so just a little bit of custom JavaScript. I think it's like 15 to 20 lines or so it's not bad. But it gives us a nice effect. And then we just have this area here, this little intro, the details area where, again, we're having this background image that we're going to position. And also, if we click Get Started, that's going to take us to an inner page. So this is the articles details page where we just have a big image. We have some text areas, some cards, this area. So you can basically use this as an inner page for whatever types of inner pages you want to use, a blog or whatever. So we'll create that probably last. And we just have some icons, some list items. Then we have this services area with some font awesome icons. Then we have another details area. And now that I'm looking at this, I might change the line height to be a little bigger. This is the default. And again, I kind of like to have a little bit more space. So we might do a little small changes like that throughout the next few videos. We have this area with the heading and a get quote. We have a projects area. Now, I didn't create modals for this. You can do that if you want. You could look at that as like your own little challenge. Just add modals for those. We're also going to implement this little slider here for the testimonials. So we can go through, and this is the carousel, I believe. So now we're not just using it for images, we're using it for content. And then we have this contact form for a quote, and then the footer. And we're also going to add this little button here that will take us back to the top if we need to. All right, so I just figured it was a nice little touch. And that will only show once we scroll. So in the user scroll function, we're also going to show this in addition to, adding the background and stuff to the navigation. All right, so that's it. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so now we're going to just get set up. We're going to add our config, our variables, customization. So you'll have a folder called Yavin Website Starter in this video, in this section. So you want to grab that and just put that anywhere. And then we're going to rename that to just Yavin Website. And then open that with your text editor. You guys know the deal by now. And then we want to run npm install to get our dependencies installed. And then we're going to run npm run sass watch. So that will watch and compile our sass. And then let's go to the index.html, and we'll go ahead and open that with live server, and we should be good to go. Let me close this stuff up. All right, now just to kind of look at this, the only thing that's different in the index.html is the font. So we're using the Open Sans font. And of course, we have the website images. And in our Bootstrap SCSS, we have the font family set to Open Sans. So now let's just add the rest of the customization here, the variables we're going to use. So as usual, we'll start with the colors. So the primary is going to be that blue. Secondary is going to be that pinkish color. So this right here. Then we have dark, which is kind of almost a blue. Let's see, where do we use that? We use that on the icons right here. I think there's somewhere else as well, the headings maybe. But that's the dark, and then the light is this gray. And then the body color, that's the text color of the body. I'm setting that to kind of a lighter color than usual. And then the headings color, yeah, the headings color is set to the dark. Okay, so that's it for colors. Now for the nav bar stuff, let's paste that in. So just a little bit of padding between the links, padding on the top and bottom of the nav bar, and then the font weight, I'm making that a little thicker as well. So for the spacing, we're going to do the same thing we do in all projects. We're just going to add 6, 7, 8. All right, and then I'm going to add some margin to the headings to the bottom. And also, like I said in the intro, I'm going to increase the line height a little bit, and we'll see how that looks, because initially I didn't do that. And then the headings font weight, I want those to be bold. And then let's do our buttons. So basically we're going to have our rounded buttons, 50 pixels, and just our regular padding. And then down here we're just doing it for all the different sized buttons. But we don't want the navbar toggler or the hamburger menu to be 50 pixels, so we set that specifically to 5 pixels. And then for the inputs, I want to set a radius of 30 pixels. So if we look down here at the form, you can see that the inputs are really rounded. So that's because of this here. And then we just added some padding as well. All right, so that should do it. So we'll go ahead and save that. And you can see that the font color is that dark color, which is like a really, really dark blue. So now we're ready to get going, so we'll continue in the next video. All right, guys, so now we're going to do the navigation and the header. And the navigation is going to be simple. It's very similar to what we've already done in past projects. The header, we do have quite a bit to do. We have these positioned absolute, what are called decoration stars. That's the name of the images. So we're going to position those. We're going to size them. We're going to have to add some media queries to make everything center. So the header is the main part of this. And since the navigation is so similar to what we've already done, I'm actually going to just paste it in and just go over it. All right, so let's paste it in. I'll save it. We'll look at our version here. And the coloring is off for the text here. I'll fix that in a second. But just to go over it real quick, we have a class of navbar, of course. Navbar expand LG. So when we go below large screens, it turns into the hamburger menu or the toggler. And sticky top is going to stick it to the top. I'm not positive on the difference between fixed top and sticky top, but I figured I'd switch it up. They both seemingly do the same thing. Navbar light because we want the text to be dark. And then we have our container. We have the brand, which with an SVG logo. I set the width to 124. The button, just a standard navbar toggler. We have the data BS toggle set to collapse. We have the target set to navbar nav dropdown, and then some ARIA attributes for accessibility. Inside that, we just have the span with the icon, and then we have our div with the class of collapse and navbar collapse, as well as the ID that matches the target. And then inside there, we have our UL with the class of navbar nav. I set it to margin start auto so that the links are on the right side. And then we just have our list items. We actually don't need a slash there. So at the very last one is formatted as a button with BTN and then BTN outline secondary. I don't think we need these classes. Let me just see if I take those off. Well, yeah, I guess we do, because it adds a little extra padding and margin. All right, so that's the navigation. Now we're going to start, well, before we do that, let's fix this text. So if I were to add a class of text white, obviously I wouldn't see this because it's a white background, but I do want it to be white when I hover. So let's set the text to be the same as the outline by going into our styles.scss, and then we're going to add for BTN, and this will apply to all of these outline secondaries. So outline dash secondary, and we're going to set the color And I'm going to use the Bootstrap variable here. So we'll say var and then dash dash bs dash secondary. So let's save that, and now you can see the color matches the outline. Now I'm going to copy this, and we want to do the hover. And I haven't really done this, but we can use Sass features like nesting. So we, instead of doing like this, :hover, I could go inside here and use the ampersand, which basically means the parent class. So it means this. So then I can do :hover like that. And then I can set the color, and we're setting the color to white. And if I save that, now if I hover, you'll see there's the white. Now this is not CSS syntax, this is Sass. So if I go into the compiled CSS, you'll see it actually is just color white. All right, so I figured I'd just kind of switch it up a bit. And you can use any Sass feature you want. I've just been trying to keep it simple. Now, for the next thing, for the header, let's go into our index.html, and we're going to add the header. So it'll be a header tag, and I'm going to give it a class of header as well so we can target it in our CSS. I want to position it relative because those decoration star images are going to be positioned absolute within it. And then let's do a margin top 6, and we're going to do an overflow overflow hidden, so that we have no horizontal scroll bars. And then we're going to put those two images in. So image, this will have a class of decoration dash star, and then I also want it to be positioned absolute. And then the image is going to be in the images folder / decoration star .svg. Okay, and we can't see it just yet because there's no content in the header and there's no height set to it. Now I'm going to copy this image and put the other one in, and the only difference is going to be the class will be decoration star 2, because we just need to position it in a different spot. One is going to be over on the left, one will be on the right. All right, now underneath that is where we're going to have our container. And the container is going to contain all of the text and the buttons and stuff. And we want the z-index to be higher than the background image because we don't want this background image over our button and stuff. So what we can do is position this relative, because in order to use a z-index, it has to be positioned relative or absolute. And then Bootstrap has z-index classes. We have Z1, I think Z0 to Z6. So I'm going to use Z3, and that should make it so it has a higher z-index. And then we're going to have 2 columns, so let's do a row, and then call -LG6, and then we'll just have a wrapper div here with the margin top 6 class, and then our H1. Now the H1, I want it to be very large, even larger than the display 1 font. So I'm just going to add a custom class of XL text. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but we're just going to add a custom class. And then we're going to say the perfect office space, but I want the word perfect to have that primary color. So what I'll do is add a span here with the class of text primary, and then in here we'll say perfect, and then outside of that we'll say office space. So if I save it, it's not going to be the size we want yet because we need to add some custom CSS. This background image is too big right now, and it's not in the placement we want it because we need to add some CSS. But let's finish with the content first. So under the H1, we'll have a paragraph with lead to make it a little bigger, and then MB4. And this paragraph text, I'm just going to paste it in. It's not much. And then under the paragraph, we'll have our 2 links formatted as buttons. So let's do A, BTN, BTN primary, and I'm also going to make it large, so BTN-LG. And let's also add margin all around too, just to give it some space. This is going to go to #introduction. And we're going to say, in here we're going to say more details. And then the button underneath, let's just copy this down. That's going to go to hash contact. And we'll change this to contact us. And I also want to change the style of the button to, let's say, outline dash secondary. Okay, so now we have the buttons, we have the text. On the other side, we're going to have this image. So let's go to where the column ends. So that ends right here. So right under it, let's say call LG6. And I'm also just going to have a class of image dash container. And then in that, we'll have the image with a class of img fluid. Okay, and that image is going to be, let's see, it's going to be called header.png. So we'll save that, and now we can see the image. All right, so now we have some custom CSS to add. So what we're going to do is go into styles.scss, and the first thing is to position the decoration stars, one on the left, one on the right. So let's say header decoration dash star. So this is the first one. So it's already positioned absolute because of the Bootstrap class. So now I'm going to say from the top, let's go 80 pixels down. And then from the left, we're actually going to use negative 200 pixels because we want it to be somewhat off the screen like this. All right, so we're giving it a negative number. And then I'm going to set the width to a smaller size. We're going to do 500 pixels. And the opacity, so it's not too dark, we're going to do 0.7. Okay, so now you can see our first one is here. Now the second one, I'm going to copy this, and that has a class of decoration star dash 2. So the only thing I'm going to change is I'm going to set, instead of the left, we're going to set it negative 200 to the right. So now we have one on each side. Now for the text here, the XL text, I'm not going to put it in header, like I'm not going to say header XL text because I want to be able to use it in other places if we want. So I'll just kind of put it at the top as a utility class. So we'll say XL dash text, and we're going to say font size and 75 pixels. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now, on smaller screens, there's some stuff that I want to fix here. So let's add a media query. Actually, we're going to have two media queries, one for like tablet size and then one for smaller mobile size. So let's say at media, this will be kind of the tablet size, so 992 pixels. What am I doing? This is max width, 992. And let's copy that down, and then this one here, let's make this, what are we going to make this, 576. 576. All right. Now the text size on this in the 992 for XL text, let's do, say, font size, and for that we'll do 50 pixels instead of 75. So now that'll shrink up a little bit. I also want, let's see, I want to push the Contact Us button down a little bit on smaller screens. So what we can do is say navbar, and then we'll take the button outline secondary, and let's add a margin dash top of 20 pixels. So now just pushes it down a little bit. So this spot here, obviously this is just too much space here. So in the 992, most of the stuff is going to go in here. There's just a couple things I want that will be only on smaller screens. But this is this size and under. So let's go right here and let's say header. And I want to set the margin dash top, because initially it's set to, I think, MT6. So I want to set it to 0. So we'll say 0 pixels, and we want to make that important. So now we have, less room up there. And then I also want to align everything to the center. So we'll say text align to the center. Okay, I think that looks better. Now the stars are these images, these background images are also too big. So let's copy these, and then inside the media query, let's paste it. We don't need to change the opacity, so we can get rid of that on both of these. We don't need to change the top. That's going to be the same, so we can get rid of that. However, I do want to change the left and right to 100, and I want to change the size of the stars. I want to make them half the size, so 250 for that and 250 for that. Save it, and now you can see they're different on smaller screens. They're smaller and they're positioned different. So let's see, the image is too close to the buttons. So remember, that has a class of image container. So we'll say image dash container, and we're going to add margin dash top, and let's set that to 30 pixels. So that will push it down a little bit. Now the only other thing I want to do is the nav bar scroll, because right now you can see it starts to scroll into this stuff and we don't have that background. So let's add our user scroll function that we used in past projects. So in script.js, I'm just going to paste this in, and once again we're just running the user scroll function when the DOM loads, and then we're grabbing the nav bar. On the window, we set a listener to listen for a scroll. We check to see if the scroll is greater than 50 on the y-axis. If it is, we're going to add a class of navbar sticky. So let's save that, and right now it won't do anything because navbar sticky is not a class. So let's create that class. So in our styles, let's put this, make sure you don't put it in a media query. You want to put it above that. So we're going to say navbar sticky, and let's set that, the opacity, well, let's add a background first. So we'll say background and set that to white, but I do want it to be transparent. So let's set the opacity to 0.9, and then I'm also going to add a box shadow. And the values for that is going to be 0, 0, 10 pixel, and then for the color RGBA, black 0, 0, 0, and then for the alpha value 0.5. All right, so now you can see that that gets added, but I want to add a transition so it's a little bit smoother. So on the nav bar, I guess we could just put it right here. So on the nav bar, I'm going to add transition, and let's just do all, and then 0.5 seconds, and ease in out. So you guys should know this by heart now, how this works. All right, so I think that this looks pretty good. So in the next video, we're going to start on the stats area, and we're going to add some custom JavaScript to increment those when we come to the page. So we're going to go ahead and create the stats part with the increment using JavaScript, so that when we come to the page, you can see it counts up. So let's go into our index.html, and let's say stats, and this is going to be a section. I'm going to give it an ID of stats so that we can grab onto it in the JavaScript, also a class of stats and a class of container. And then we're going to do a row, and I just want to add margin on the top and bottom, so my6. And then we're going to break this up into 4 rows. That means that each one will take up 3 slices. So call MD3 is what we want. Now on small screens, I only want it to be 2 columns, so it'll take up 6 slices. So call SM-6. And then let's also just make sure we text center. And then inside that, we'll have an H2 with a class of counter. And we're also going to use that XL text class that we used in the header. And the way that this is going to work is we don't need to put a number in here because it's going to get put in by the JavaScript. However, right now, I'll just put in 10 just so we can see it. And then it's going to have we're going to add a custom attribute called data-target. So that's going to be set to whatever the number we want, which in our case is going to be 328. Actually, we can just put the actual number in here for now, so 328. But ultimately, it's going to come from the JavaScript. And then underneath the H2, we'll have a paragraph and just say happy customers. So if we check it out, it should look like that. So now we'll add the other parts. So we want to just copy the column div and everything in it. And we'll have that's 2, 3, and 4. Now for the second one, we're going to do, let's say, 285. Put that here. Make sure we put it in here as well. And that's going to be issues solved. And then for this one here, let's take these two and let's make this number 159. And that's going to be good reviews. And then let's take this, and this is going to be 128. And that's going to be case studies. Okay, so let's save it. And it looks good, but it's static right now. We want it to count up. So we're going to have to add a little bit of JavaScript. So let's go to our script.js, and we're going to have a function. I'll go above the event listener here, and let's say function. I'm going to call it increment stats. And we want to grab the counters, right? Because if we look, we have a counter class on each of these, so there's 4 of them. So we can't use query selector because we're getting more than one. So we're going to use query selector all, which will get all the counter elements and basically put them into an array. It's called a node list, but it's similar to an array. So let's say counters, and then document dot query selector all, and we want to select all of the classes of counter. Now after that, we're going to take those counters and I want to loop through them. So I'm going to use a for each array method. And for each takes in a function. So I'll pass in an arrow function. And what we pass in here is whatever variable we want to represent each individual counter or each individual item that we're looping through, which is this counters array, which will be the counter elements. And then what I want to do in the function is first of all set the counter dot inner text to 0. Okay, and then I'm going to actually create a function in here because what I'm about to put in here, this JavaScript, we have to run more than once. So we're going to create a function. I'm going to use an arrow function and just say const update counter, and we're going to set that to an arrow function. And in here, let's say const, and we want to get the target. And what I mean by that is this, the data targets. So the way that we can get that is by taking the counter and then using the get attribute method, and we want to get the attribute of data dash target. Now that will come in as a string. I want to make it a number, and you can do that in JavaScript by just adding a plus sign onto the beginning. That'll just cast it from a string to a number. And then I also want the inner text, so let's say const, and I'll just call this C, and we're going to set that to plus because I want this to be a number, and then the counter dot inner text. Okay, so this variable target represents this, the data targets, and the C variable represents the inner text, which we can actually get rid of this now. I just wanted to see it so we could see what it looked like. We can get rid of those right now. All right, now we have the target, we have the inner text element. Let's create the increment. So how fast do we want this to increment? And we can do that by setting or by taking the target, and let's divide that by 200. And then we're going to see if the C, which is the inner text, is if that is less than the target. Remember, that starts at 0, and then it's going to count up. If it's less than target, we want it to count up. Else, then we're just going to set the counter inner text to the target, right? So if the target is 128 and it gets to 128, then we don't want it to go any higher. Now in here, in order for it to count up, we're going to take the counter.innerText and we're going to set that to math.ceil, which will round up whatever I put in it. And then what I'm going to put in it is that C value plus the increment. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to do here is have a set timeout, which runs a function after a certain amount of time. The function I want to run is update counter. So we're calling this function recursively. We're calling it within itself. So update counter, and then the second argument is how long do you want to wait. We're just going to do 1 millisecond. Okay, just so it runs in order. And then let's go underneath the update. Let's see, this ends here. Yeah, we want to go under the update counter, which ends right here, and we want to call it. So we're going to say update counter, and then we just want to call the parent function, which is increment stats, and we're going to call that when the DOM loads. So I'll copy this down, and we'll just pass in here, increment stats, save it, and there we go. All right, so again, it's just getting the counters, so those 4 things, looping through, taking the counter, setting the inner text to 0 to start with, and then we're calling update counter, which then gets the target, the inner text, creates the increment, which basically sets like the speed essentially, and then we check if C is less than the target. If it is, we count up. If it's not, we stop. Now if I change this to, let's say, 500, you'll see that took longer, right? That took longer. If I set it to 100, then it's quicker. So I think 200 is a good speed. So that'll do it for the top part of the website. So in the next video, we'll move on to the next sections. All right, so now we're going to do the introduction section and the details 1 section, which is this. That's introduction, and then details. And we also have that background image, which we need to position. But I think I'm going to change this up to be a little more narrow, maybe call 8, and put it in the middle, text it center rather than this. But it's really up to you on this stuff. So let's go under the last section. We'll say this is going to be introduction, and it's going to have an ID of introduction because one of the buttons in the header goes to it. And then I'm also going to give it a class of just intro, and let's give it a class of bg-light, and padding on the Y we'll do 6. And then inside that we'll have our container and then a row. And like I said, I want to do call MD8 and then offset. So offset MD2. And then inside that we'll have an H2. We're going to say creating, and then I want the word inspiring to be the secondary color. So I'll put a span here with the class of text secondary, and then we'll say unique. And then after that we'll say office spaces. Okay, so if we go down, let's see, that doesn't, oh, we need to center the text as well for this column. So let's say text dash center, and there we go. Now underneath that we'll have a paragraph. So let's do P, and I'm going to do a class of FS5, and let me just grab that text. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think that looks a little better than this, but it's completely up to you. So next we have the details section, or details 1. There's actually going to be 2 of these. So this is details 1. And let's see, we're going to have a section with an ID of details, and I'll also just give it a class of details. And then we're also going to do position relative because the background images are going to be positioned absolute. So position relative. Let's do my-6, and let's do overflow hidden. And then inside that we'll have our image, which is going to have a class of decoration dash star, just like the header. We're going to position it absolute. And then that's going to be images slash decoration star SVG. And we're not going to see it yet because we have no content and no height. But underneath that image, let's create the container. And on that container, I'm going to position it relative. And I'm also going to add a Z, we'll say Z3, just like the header. And in the container, we're going to have a row. And let's do call LG6. This will be the image, so it's going to go in a class called image-container. And I also want to make that a flex so I can align the image. So I'm going to say deflex and then justify-content-center. And then we can put the image in there. It's going to have a class of img fluid to take up 100% of its container. And it's going to be images slash details1.png. Okay, so there we go. And the background image is really big right now and it's not positioned, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. Let's do the other column, which will be the content, the text. So we'll do call LG-6. And I'm going to just push everything down. So we'll do an MT4 and then an H2, and we'll say create and then span. Let's do, what are we doing? Text primary. We'll say unique. So this one says creating. So I have the same text here, which actually let's make this one inspiring. And again, the content I just got from ChatGPT, so it's not great, but that's not really the point. You can have all dummy content if you want, or all the same. It doesn't really matter. It's the design, it's the CSS and all the classes and stuff that matter. So we'll say office spaces, all right, and then underneath that H2, we're going to have our UL, which is going to be unstyled. So let's say list dash unstyled, and that should do it for that. And then each list item, I'm also going to make a flex box because I want it to be a row with the check icon and then the text to the right. And then I'm just going to add margin bottom 3 here. Now for the icon, let's do fas.fa-check. It's going to be the check icon, and let's do text primary to change the color, and then let's do FA2x for the size, and then margin on the x-axis 4. Let's see, if we save that, then we see the little check mark, and then underneath that is going to be just a paragraph with some text, which I'll grab. Okay, and then what I'll do is just copy this list item, and we're going to have 4 of these. So that's 2, 3, and 4. And all I'm going to change is the text. You don't have to change it if you don't want to, but I'm just going to throw in that. What else? This. And this. All right, so let's save that. And now we have the, and don't worry about the background image, that's not going to be there. But now we have our 4 list points. Now we just want to move and size the background image, which is going to be really simple. Actually, we can just copy this. And let's see. We want to be outside of the media query. And we're just going to change this to details and decoration star, and I want it to be from the left 200, and we're going to make the width 500. Let's see what that looks like. I want to see what it looks like on smaller screens, so we could just keep it, yeah, we could keep it the way it is. If you wanted to make it smaller, you could, like we did here in the header. But in the header, we had 2 of them. So here we only have one, so I think that it's fine if we just, yeah, if we keep it like that. I think that looks good. I just want to add a little bit of space under this heading right here. That looks too cluttered. So let's see, we have an H2, let's say class, and we'll do MB4. Yeah, it looks a little better. That existence should be an uppercase E. Existence as disclosure is, but these words don't even make sense. But that's fine. All right, so we have, actually, I just want to see. Yeah, that's fine. Well, maybe we should do this right here instead of call LG. Maybe we should do call MD8 in the offset. So let me just see here what this looks like if we do call LG, call LG. So now it's 100% right now. And then when it hits large, then it shrinks down. All right. Yeah, so that looks good. So we'll go ahead and continue in the next video. All right, so now we're going to do the next 3 sections, which are going to be this services area with the icons, this details to section, and then this get quote right here. All right, so let's get into it. Let's go to the bottom of our HTML, and we're going to add the services section. So section, and we're going to give it an ID of services, and let's also give it a class of services, and let's see, we're going to do BG. Let's do BG dash light and padding on the y-axis 6. And then we'll have our container, we'll have our row, and then for the columns, I'm going to do 5-7 on this. So let's say call dash LG dash 5. And what we're looking at is this right here, the services. So this will be 5, this will be 7. All right, so in the 5, we're just going to have a text container. And in that, we'll have an H2. Let's do a span and text secondary, because I want to change the color of just the word services. So we'll say services. And then after the span, we'll do a space, and then that we offer. So it should look like this. And then underneath that H2, we'll just have a paragraph, and I'll just grab some text to throw in there. So that's that side. Now for the right side, let's go under call LG5, which ends here. We're going to do call dash LG7. And then we'll have a row, and I'm going to just add a margin bottom 4 here. And then we're going to have a div. So I'm going to actually do some nested columns. So we have 2 columns here, but inside of it, we're going to have 3 columns on each row. So in the first row, let's have our call MD dash 4. And then I'm also going to make this a flex box. So we'll say deflex, but I want it to be a flex column because the icon and the text are on top of each other. I just want to align them with align items center, and then I want to align the text center as well. Okay, now in this div we'll have our icon, which is going to be FAS, and I'll admit the icons that are used here don't really make sense with the text, but that's fine. You can change it out if you want. So let's say FS, what are we doing here? FA dash rocket is the first icon, and then we're going to just make it a little bigger, so FA dash 4X. We're going to change the color to secondary, text secondary, and let's add margin bottom 2. Okay, so we should have our rocket icon, and then directly under that, we're going to have our text, which will be a paragraph with the class of, let's do FS-5, and let's also make it bold, so font weight bold. And then the text we're going to have in here is going to be space analysis. What is it? Space analysis and planning. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now we're just going to have a bunch of these. So let's take this div. So this is the first row. That was the first column. So this will be the second. And let's change the text to, let's see, what are we doing? Design and color choosing. And then the icon for this is going to be clock. I know it doesn't really make sense. Then underneath that div, we'll have the third column in the first row. And the icon we're going to use here is going to be comments, and that's going to be materials and delivery. So we should have our three. Now underneath that row, so this nested row that I have, which ends here, I'm going to put in another row. We don't have to. You could just add more columns and just keep one row, but I'm just going to separate them here. And then I'll paste in another div, and this one is going to be execute the concept. So execute the concept, and the icon for that is going to be tools. Okay, so that's our second row, first column, and the second one is going to be creating create a great atmosphere. Create a great atmosphere, and then the icon for that is going to be chart pie. So chart dash pie. And then for the last one, that's going to be evaluation and reporting. And let's see, the icon for that is going to be chart dash bar. So that's pretty much it for the services. Now on smaller screens, I think we should center this text. And instead of just putting text center in a media query, what we could do is say that on large screens we want it to be aligned to the start, but then on smaller screens align center. So let's go up to where that text is. That's right here, the text container. And let's say, so text, let's make it text center by default, right? And then when it gets to large, so text dash LG, then we'll align it to the start or to the left. So now you can see it's aligned on the left because it's large, but when we go smaller, then it's in the center. Now on small screens, I also want to add some space between these and put a border bottom. So we can go into our max width 992 media query, and let's say services, and then we're going to get the call MD4, and let's say border dash bottom. We'll set it to 1 pixel CCC and solid. Okay, so now they have a border on the smaller screens. And then I just want to add some margin, so let's also do margin, and we'll say 7 pixels on the top and bottom, and that kind of, gives it a little bit of space. Could do a little more, maybe 10. Yeah, so I think that looks good. That looks good. All right, so that's services. Now details 2 is going to be similar to this, except the background image is going to be on the right, and the regular image is going to be on the right as well. So let's do that. Let's go under the services, and we'll say details 2. And as far as the classes go, we'll say details dash 2. We're going to position relative because we have the background image, that's going to be absolute. Let's do my6, and let's do overflow dash hidden. Hidden. So the image is going to have a class of decoration star. So let's do that. And then we want to position that to be absolute. So position absolute. And what else? I think that should do it. Now the image itself is going to be the decoration star. Okay, and again, we're not going to be able to see it just yet. Let's see, underneath that is where we're going to add our container. So let's say container, and let's also make that position relative because I want to put a z-index on it. So we're going to say z3 for that. And in the container, let's do a row. And in the row, let's do our call LG6. And inside that, we'll have an H2. That H2 is going to say transform your workspace for enhanced. And then I want the word productivity to be colored. So we're going to say text primary. Whoops, that should be a span. So span text primary, and then in here we're going to say productivity. Okay, now underneath that we'll have a paragraph. I'm just going to grab the text for that. So under the H2, paragraph, and then throw some text in there. And then we're going to have a button or a link underneath that formatted as a button. So BTN, let's do BTN primary. And this is going to actually go to the article.html. So that's going to be the inner page that we'll create in a little bit. And let's just say get started. So that's that side. Now for the other side, we'll have the image. So call LG6 ends right here. So we'll do another call LG6 with an image dash container, and in that we'll have an img with the class of img fluid, and the image will be details2.png. And actually I wanted to use a flexbox here because I want to align that image. So on the image container, let's say deflex, and then we'll do justify content in the center, and that will push that over. Now for the background image, let's go to our styles SCSS, and let's go up above the media query. We can copy this, and we're going to say details to, and then just set left to right. Okay, so now it's positioned over here, and I just want to, on smaller screens, let's see what that looks like. So on smaller screens, I want to move that down because the image is now down here. So let's go into the media query, and let's say, let's see, first of all, details 2, I'm going to remove the margin. So details 2, let's set margin top to 0, and we'll make that important. Actually, maybe not 0. That's too much. Let's do 15 pixels or 20 pixels. And let's also center that, just like we did with the other ones. So where we have the text container, not the text container, where we have this paragraph here, we could wrap it. Yeah, you know what? This H2 and paragraph and button, I'm going to wrap in a text container. So let's take H2 paragraph and the link, cut that, and put that in the text container, which I'm then going to do text center, and then I'll do text dash LG dash start. So that way it's centered there. Okay, and then let's add some margin to push this down. So we'll also do MB4 and that will push that image down a little bit, and that still looks fine. Okay, now for the background image, let's go back to styles, and let's see, I'm gonna say details 2, and then we want the decoration star, and I'm gonna say from the top, let's do 300 pixels. Okay, so that moved it down. And yeah, I think that's really all I wanted to do. So that, because I want it to be next to the image, the inline image. Now we just have the get quote section, which is really simple. So we're going to go under this last one and let's say get quote. And we'll give this a class of get dash quote. And then let's also do BG light and padding Y6 and text center. And then in the container, we'll have a row. And I'm going to do call LG. We're going to offset it. So call LG8 and then call, I'm sorry, not call, offset dash, yeah, let's do offset LG2. That should put it in the middle. And then we'll have an H4. And then I'm just going to grab that text real quick. Okay, and then under the H4, we'll just have an A tag with BTN, BTN secondary. And of course, you can change these colors and buttons and stuff if you want. And this will go to hash contact. And then let's see, for the text, let's just say get quote. All right. I'd like to add let's see what it looks like with a little more line height. So on that H4, if we do class LH-LG, that's a little too much. LG base, which I think is the default, right? No, that gives it a little more. I think that looks better. And maybe make the button large, BTN LG. Yeah. And then on small screens, that looks good. All right, so I think that we're looking pretty good. So what we have left is the projects, the testimonial slider or carousel, the form, and the footer. So we'll get started on those next. So now we're going to do the projects area, so this here, and we're also going to do the testimonial slider. So let's start with the projects. Jump over here and add a new section. Say projects. And for the section, we'll have an ID of projects and also do a class of projects. And then let's do a class of PY6. So generally what I'm doing here with the margin and padding is if it has a background like this one does, if it has a background image or color, then I'll typically do the padding because it's going to be within that. If it's white, then I'll typically do margin. So that's just how I do it, but of course there's a million ways to do it, just to add spacing. So let's add a container. That's kind of one of the things that I'm trying to do through this course is get you familiar with just my way of structuring things and doing things, just to give you kind of a baseline. But of course, you might find different ways to do it, things that work better for you. So let's create an H2 here and text center. And we'll do padding bottom 4. And the H4 is going to say sum of, actually let's make that uppercase, sum of our, and then projects is going to be in a span with a class of text secondary. So we'll say projects in here. There we go. And then I'm just going to have, underneath that, we'll have a row with 3 projects and then another row with 3 more. So let's, under this H2, I'm just going to say projects row 1, and let's make this a div with the class of row. And I'm also going to do MB4 to move the other row down a little bit. And then we'll have our first column. So it's going to be call MD4 since it's a 3-column row. And then we're going to have our card. So let's do class card, but I don't want a border. So I'm also going to add border -0. And then we'll have our image. So let's say image, and that's going to be images / and then project 1. And then underneath that, we'll do a class of card body. And the card body will have an H5 with the class of card-title. And for the title, we'll say office space for banking. And then under that, we'll have a paragraph with the class of card text. And for that, I'm just going to put some dummy text. We'll do lorem 10. And then underneath the paragraph, let's add an A tag, a link. And we're going to have a class. Actually, I don't think we did. Yeah, they're just going to be regular links. If you want to style it as a button, you can, but I'm just going to style it as a regular link. And this is going to go to the article page. So it'll say read more. And let's actually change that to go to article.html. So let's take a look. There we go. All right. So with this one, I actually put the link in the paragraph, so it's kind of in line with it. Yeah, I mean, I guess we could do that. We can move that into there. It's up to you on how you want to set that up. All right, so now we're going to copy the column with the card in it. Okay, so that's one. Let's do the second one, which is going to be the only thing we want to change is the project image, and then the text here. We're going to say planning and design for startup. Okay, so there's our second one. Let's create the third. So that's going to be project 3. And that's going to be colors and materials update. So colors and materials update. Okay, so that's the first row. Now what we'll do is copy the row. So this row ends here. So I'm going to grab that with the comment, and then directly under it, let's paste that in, and we'll say projects row 2. And we're just going to change this to project 4. We'll change the text here to, what are we doing here? Analysis and floor design. Okay, then we have project 5 and project 5 text, which is going to be office space decoration. And then finally we have project 6. And the text for that is going to be playground for kindergarten. Grayton kindergarten. And that should do it. So now we have our rows, and if it's on smaller screens, it's going to just stack. Cool. So next is going to be the testimonials. Now this is going to be a carousel. So we did a carousel, I think in project 2, was it? The Corso. So this is going to be pretty similar. Let's see, testimonials, except it's not images, it's actual content. I mean, there is an image. There is the image of the person, but there's also a paragraph and the person's name and so on. So let's say section. We're going to give this an ID of testimonials and a class of testimonials and a class of BG light and a class of PY6. Again, this has the light background, so I'm doing the padding on the top and bottom. And then we're going to have an ID. Let's do a div with the ID of, let's say, testimonial carousel. And then this will have a class of carousel and a class of slide. And then we'll have our carousel dash inner class. And let's just say slide 1. So this is going to be the content for slide 1. It's going to be in a class of carousel dash item. And I want this to be active. So we'll give it the active class. And we're going to use dflex here. So we're going to display as a flex box. And I want it to be a flex column. Okay, so what we're talking about here is, oh no. So what we're talking about is this. So this is going to be a flex column where this is the first item, second item, third item. So flex column, let's justify to the center. So justify dash content dash center, and let's do align items dash center. We want to align it vertically and horizontally, and we're going to text center. Okay, now we'll have the image, and the image is going to have a class of rounded dash circle, and the image will be, let's say, images slash testimonial 1. And I'm just going to set a width here as well to 120. Okay, so we save that. You can see we have the image. Now it should be rounded. I spelled that wrong, that's why. Circle. Okay, so now underneath the image we're going to have a paragraph, and I'm going to do width 50, so it'll be 50% width. And then let's do margin on the y-axis 4. I want this to be italic, so let's do FST-italic because it's a testimonial. And then FS4 for the font size, and margin bottom 4. And I'm going to just grab the text here. Makes absolutely no sense. It's basically just gibberish, but it's all right. So under the paragraph, we're going to do a font weight, a div with the font weight of bold. And let's do FS5 and margin top 4. And we're going to say Mallory, or what is it, Marlene Visconti. Okay, and then underneath that we'll have another div, and we're going to say general manager dash scouter. Okay, so that's the first one. Now we can either do the buttons next or the next slide. I think I'm just going to do the slide. So we have 2 more. So I'm going to grab this div right here, carousel item ends here. So I'm going to just grab that with the comment, and right under that, let's paste that in, and this is going to be slide 2, and then we're going to change it to testimonial 2. I'm also going to just wait a minute, do we have the same? Yeah, we have the same text for all of them. If you want to change it, that's okay, but I'm just going to leave it. And the name here, I'm going to change that to John Spiker, and position, we're going to say, oops, let's say team leader, and the company is Vanquish. Okay, so that's the second one, and we're only going to see the latest one because we don't have the buttons yet. But then after that slide, let's paste the last one in. That's going to be testimonial 3, and I'll leave the text, but the name I'm going to change that to, let's see, we're going to do Stella Virtuoso. And let's see, the position is going to be design chief, and that's going to be at Bike Girl. Okay, so now we can only see that one. And we're seeing all of the text and stuff. The image, basically we're seeing just the images are on top of each other. So now what we'll do is, actually, do I have all the classes right? So carousel, slide, carousel item. Oh, I know why, because we have active on all of them. So on 2 and 3, let's get rid of active. I was confused on what was going on there because I know we shouldn't see more than one. All right, so we see the first one. Now let's add the buttons to change. So those are going to go, let's see, under carousel inner. So carousel inner ends right here. We're going to go under that. Right? Yeah. And then we're going to have a button. And let's give it a class of carousel. So carousel dash control dash prev, because it's the previous. And let's give it a type of button. And we're going to want to add the target. So data dash bs dash target. And we're going to set that to the ID of the carousel, which I think was ID testimonial carousel, I believe. Yeah, let me just double check that. So testimonial carousel, so you want those to match. And then we also want to just do the data BS slide. So data BS dash slide and set that to prev. And then inside the button is where we want the icon. So we're going to use a font awesome icon of FAS and then FA dash arrow dash circle dash left. Okay, and I'm going to give it a class. Actually, let's do the sizing. So it's going to be FA and then 3x, and then the color we'll do text dash secondary. All right, so let's see. Okay, so that looks pretty good, and it works. So now we just need to do the other button, so we'll just copy this one, change a couple things. We want to change it to next here and here. And let's see that this is going to be circle right. Okay, so now there we go. So very easy, and didn't have to write a line of JavaScript. All right, that's one thing I like better about Bootstrap than Tailwind is the JavaScript plugins that are available. So yeah, that's good. I mean, if we make it smaller, you know, on small screens, it's still decent. It's a little narrow, but I think it's fine. So in the next video, we'll wrap this page up, the home page, by adding the form and the footer. So now we want to do the contact form and the footer. So let's go down to the bottom here. And this will be the contact. Let's give it a section of, actually we're going to give it an ID of contact and a class of contact. And this one has the white background, or doesn't have a BG background, so we'll do margin Y6. And then we're going to have the background image. So this right here, the decoration star. So let's put that first. So IMG class decoration dash star. We're going to position this to be absolute. And yeah, that should do it. And then it's going to be images slash decoration star. All right, and let's position this. Let's position this relative. Okay, now underneath that, we're going to have our container, and we're also going to position that relative because I want to add a z-index. You guys know the deal by now. We've done this quite a few times in this project. So position relative, and then we'll do z3 so that everything is on top of the background image. And then we'll have our row. Now let's see, I just want to see something here. So when I make this smaller, notice the image actually goes away. So we only have the image on medium screens and up. Otherwise, it's just going to be the form. So what we're going to do is for this column, we're going to do call LG6, but we're going to put on a class of D-none, which is display none, but then we'll also add D-MD, so on medium screens, then it'll be display block. Okay, and then we'll have our image dash container, and in the image container we'll have an image with the class of img-fluid. The image is going to be called contact PNG, and that should do it for the image. So let's take a look. Good, and just never mind this huge background image, we'll fix that. And then let's go under the call LG6, and we're going to do another call LG6. And let's add a text container. Okay, and then in the text container we'll have our H2. Let's say contact us for a quote. And then we'll have our form. So in the form, each input is going to be wrapped in margin bottom 3. Say input and give it a class of form control. Type is going to be text, and let's add a placeholder as well. So placeholder, we'll say enter name. Okay, now we're going to copy this MB3. And this next one is going to be for the email. So we'll change the type to email, and we'll say enter email. Next we have the phone. So again, paste in the MB3, and let's say enter phone. And then the last one will be the message. So that's actually going to be a text area, so get rid of the input and the type. Say text area. And text area has to have a closing tag, so we want to just add on to that /text area. And let's say enter message. Okay. Now I do want this to be bigger, so let's add some rows. We're going to add a rows attribute, and we'll set that to 8. And that will make that larger. And then if we want the button, so I'm going to go under this last div here, and let's do D-grid to make it block, and then gap 2, and then we'll add, let's actually do a submit input. So we'll say input : submit, so it's a type submit. The value we'll say send, and then let's do a class of btn primary and btn-block. And there we go. Now as far as the background image, this decoration star, we're going to go into our style.scss, and let's say contact, and then actually we can just copy this and then just change this to contact, and the values for this are going to be left, so left -300 pixels, and I'm going to do width of 600 pixels. So if we check it out, so now we have the image over here, which I think looks pretty good. So the last thing is the footer, at least on this page. We are going to do another inner page, but on this page the last thing is going to be the footer. So let's say footer, and we'll give it a class of footer, and let's do bg-light, and let's do py6, and then we'll have a class of container, a row, and then we're going to have a call md4 because we're going to have 3 columns, and let's also do an my3, and in h6 we'll say about Yavin, and then a paragraph, and I think that should do it, just a paragraph. And I'm just going to put some dummy content, so lorem 20, or let's do lorem 15. Okay, and then the next column, so under this one, let's add another call MD4 and another MY3. And then we'll have an H6, say links. Under that, we'll have a UL with the class of list unstyled. And let's do, what else do I want to do here? I think that should do it, just list unstyled. And then each list item is just going to have like a label. We'll say important, colon, and then just some links that don't really go anywhere. This is going to be terms and conditions. Okay, then we'll have a comma, and then we'll put another link and say privacy policy. And then the next list item, we'll just say useful. Put an A tag, and this is going to be icon library. These are just random links. It doesn't really matter what we put here. And then we're going to have illustrations. Okay, and then the final list item, we'll say menu, and we'll have a link to, say, home, and let's do details. So these will be actual links to certain parts of the page. Same as the navigation or nav menu. Details, then we'll have services, and we'll have contact. Okay, so that's the second part, and then the third and final will be the social. So let's go under the column. So call MD4 and MY3. And then I'm also just going to do a margin bottom 4 around these. And then we'll have an A tag. Inside that, let's do an I tag with FAS, FA-Facebook. And let's do 3 times, so LI-3X. Text is going to be, the color is going to be text dark, and then let's do MX2. That didn't, oh, social media icons has to have the FAB. And then this should be, I don't know why I did that, it should be FA. All right, and then we'll just copy that down. 2, 3, 4. So we just want Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. Now see how there's an underline? That's because the text decoration. So on the link here, we can say class, and we can say text dash decoration dash none. And that should get rid of the line. So let's just add that to these A tags. Okay, and then just underneath the MB4, we're going to have a paragraph and just say, we would love to hear from you. And then we'll have an A tag, and it will just be a mail to. So you would do like mail to whatever, contact at site.com, whatever the email address is. And then in here we'll put, we'll just throw a strong tag in and just put contact at site.com. And there we go. So that's our footer. So our home page is now done. Let's just make this smaller and see what this looks like. Yeah, so it looks good. Cool. So in the next video, I want to do the article page. So right now, if I click on, let's see, is it this get started? Yeah, get started, goes to article HTML. So in the next video, we'll go ahead and create that. All right, guys, so I know I said in the last video that we were going to be doing the inner page now, but there's one thing I want to do before that, and that's this back to top button, so that we can click it, brings us to the top, and it only shows when we start to scroll down. So let's do that. Now the HTML for that is very, very simple, so we're just going to add this. We'll just go ahead and put it down at the bottom. It doesn't really matter because we're positioning it fixed. Let's see, we're going to put it right below the footer, just at the very bottom. So let's say button, and I'm going to give it an ID of 2-top, and then a class of 2-top-btn. And then we'll have an image, because there's just an up arrow image that we're going to use. So images / and then up arrow PNG. So right now it's right here and it looks horrible, so we need to add some custom styles. We're not really using any Bootstrap with this particular button. So let's go above the media query and let's say 2-top-btn. We're going to position it to be fixed. And I'm going to set the z-index to, let's set it to 10. We want it, well, we'll set it to even higher. Let's do 20 because we want it to be on top of everything. And then I'm going to set it at the bottom. So let's say bottom 20 pixels. So 20 pixels up from the bottom, and then 20 pixels over from the right. And then the opacity is going to be 0 by default, which means it's invisible, because that's how I want it to be when we come to the page. But for right now, I'm going to comment that out because I want to be able to see it while I style it. So now it's positioned over here and it's in a fixed position, right? So we need some other styles. The width, we're going to set that to 52 pixels, and also the height to 52 pixels. And then let's do border none, or border 0, and then let's do the border radius. So border radius, we want it to be a circle, so we're going to do 50% for that. And then the outline, we're also going to set to none. So if I save it, that's what it looks like. You can barely see it, so let's do the background color. We're going to set that to, let's see, 44434A. So now we can see it. And we're also going to make the cursor into a pointer when we hover over it. So let's say cursor pointer. And then let's also add a transition so that it fades in and out when we scroll up and down. So transition all 0.5 seconds and ease in out. Okay, so looks good. It doesn't do anything yet. I also want to add a hover, so let's take that and let's do a hover. Or we can be consistent with what we did earlier and use SAS, use nesting, so we can say ampersand : hover. And for that, we're just going to set the background dash color. We're going to set it to 1D1D21. So if I hover over it, you can see it. I mean, it's very slight. And it also has a transition because we transition all. So what else do we want to do here? The image that's inside of it, I want that to be more centered. If we look at this one, you can see it's smaller and it's more centered. So let's say two top button, and then we can do this. We can just put image in here. We can nest. And then let's add margin dash bottom, and we're just going to do 0.25 rem, and then we're going to set the width of the image to 18 pixels. Okay, so I think that that looks a little better. Now, like I said, it's going to be set opacity 0, so I'm going to uncomment that, and now we can't see it. But I'm going to add a class of show, and then that's going to set the opacity to 1. So basically what we need to do is in our JavaScript is dynamically add and remove this show class when we scroll, right? And we already have the scroll functionality. So let's go to script.js. Where is it? Script.js. And we already have this user scroll. So in addition to the nav bar, let's bring in two top btn. Set that to document.query selector, and we'll get the ID. Get the ID of 2-top, and then down here, if the window scroll Y is greater than 50, we're going to take the 2-top button, and we're going to take the class list object and use the add method, and we're going to add the class of show. Okay, then I'll copy this line, and down here, when we're not in that range, then we want to remove that class. So remove. So let's save that, and then I'm going to go to the top here, and you can see it disappeared. When I start to scroll, then it appears. All right, cool. Oh, and of course, we want this to, when we click on it, we want it to bring us up. So let's add, let's see. So I want to just, there's a few ways we could do this, but what we're going to do is create another function called scroll to top. And this is going to be simple. It's just 2 lines. So we're going to basically take the body element with document.body, and we can say scroll top and set that to 0. So that's for Safari. For Chrome, Firefox, and IE, or Edge rather, in IE, we're going to say document dot and then document element dot scroll top and set that to 0. So we're just setting that position to 0. Now we want that to happen when we click on this button. So we need to add an event listener. I'm going to put it down here. We'll just put a comment and say event listeners. Right? Because these are all things that we're listening on and doing something with. So let's take we'll say document dot query selector, and we'll select the 2-top again, so ID of 2-top, and then we'll add an event listener onto that. And the event that we want to listen for is a click, and when that click happens, then we want to call scroll to top. So let's save it. Let's come down here and click it, and it brings us to the top, right? Because it's just setting that property on the document body or on the document element. It's setting that scroll top property to 0. So that's it. Now in the next video, we're going to move on to the inner article page. So now we're going to create the inner article page, which you go to if you click this. But actually, you know what? I think we're supposed to have a button here as well. Yeah, let's create a button with this one. So I'm going to copy, let me just search for article.html. So this get started, which is in the details 2. Let's also put it in details 1. I believe that's how I had it at first. I closed the other website, but I'm going to put it right under the paragraph here. Save it. Let's see. Oh, that's in a flex box. So we actually want it outside of the UL. There we go. So now if I click that, it takes us to the article page, or this one, or any of these links right here. Now the article page doesn't exist, so live server is telling me it can't get it. So I'm going to create a file called article.html, and we're going to need to get basically from the top to the bottom of the nav. So we want to get all of this down to the nav, copy that, put that in there, and then we want to get from the bottom up to the beginning of the footer. So right here. And we'll get that, we'll put that right here, paste it in, save, and there we go. So this is basically the template if you want to create any inner pages. So if you plan on doing that, copy this code and put it in a file called template.html or _template.html, and then you can just start from here when you create a new page. So I'm going to go under the nav, and we're going to add the header, which is going to be very simple. So we're going to say header with a class of BG light and PY6, and then we'll have a container. And all I'm going to have here is an H1. I'm just going to say article details. And that's it. So very simple. So whatever the page name is. And then we're going to have the image underneath that. So under the header, actually let's put a comment here. Just say header image. So for that we're going to say, actually let's put this in a section. And we'll have a container, and in that container we'll have our image. Let's give it a class. I'm going to do W100 and MY6, and the image is going to be /articles details large. So let's save that. Okay, there we go. If you want to give it rounded corners or something like that, you can. Now we're going to move on to the text part. So we have, I don't have the final version open. I guess I could let's just look at it real quick. Yavin website, index.html. Let's put it here, and okay, so we have this basic text area, then we're going to have the 3 cards, then we have this area with the gray background, which I might change up. I might make the text a little smaller or give some more padding. But let's do the basic text part. So under that image, I'm just going to say basic text, and that's going to be a section. Let's do a class of PT4, so padding top, and then a container, and then a row. Whoops. Do row. And in that row, I'm going to do a 10 column. So let's do call LG 10, and let's offset it. So offset, because I want it to be a little more narrow. So I'm going to offset it by 1. So LG 1, because it's going to be 1 on each side and 10 in the middle. So here we're just going to have a paragraph, and we can just put some lorem. Let's do lorem 30. And then I'm going to do another paragraph, and I'm going to do margin bottom. Let's do margin bottom 6. Oops. Margin bottom 6, and I'll do lorem 20. And then underneath that paragraph, let's have an H2, and for that we'll do margin bottom 3. And we'll say advantages of working with this company. And then we'll have 2 more paragraphs. So I'm actually just going to copy both of these. Except here we'll do margin bottom 4. Okay. And then underneath, actually that's it for the basic text part. And let's shorten this space up a little bit. So right here, let's do 4. Yeah, I think that's fine. So now we'll do the cards. So basically we're going to have 3 cards in a row. So let's go under the section, and let's say cards, and let's do section my-4. And you can do this however you want. I think that by now, if you've been following along, you should have the tools necessary to create your own layouts however you want. So let's do a row and a call MD, because I know a lot of this stuff is repetitive, and for some of you it might get a little boring, but we're drilling it into your head on how to create layouts. Let's add a card here. We're going to do padding 3 around it. Actually, let's not do padding 3. Let's add the card body. And in the card body, we'll have an H5. That's going to have a check icon, so FAS, FA-check. And let's do text-secondary for the color. And then next to that I tag, we'll say high quality service. And then under that H5, we'll have a paragraph, and we'll do lorem 15. Let's see what that looks like. All right. Now let's copy the call, which ends here. And we'll go right under it, paste it in, and then we're just going to change this to prompt timely service. Okay, so now we have 2. And then we'll do underneath this call MD4, paste in the last one, and that's going to be skilled team involved. Okay, so those are our very, very simple cards. And then underneath we're going to have that gray box. So let's say gray box. And that's going to be a section. We're going to do MY6 and a row. And we'll do a call LG8 and an offset LG-2. And then we'll wrap this in a card, and we're going to do BG-light, which is the gray background. And let's do rounded. Actually, yeah, let's do rounded 0, because it'll have a little bit of round by default. And then border, I also don't want a border, so we'll set border 0, and then font size, let's do -6. Try that. And then at H3, we're going to say we know what our customers want. And then underneath that, we'll have a paragraph with just lorem 30. Or let's do lorem 20. I forgot the card body. That's why there's no padding. So let's add card-body. And then we want to move the H3 in the paragraph into that. Okay, so that gives us some padding. I do want to add a little bit more, though. So let's do like padding. Let's try padding 4. Yeah, that gives it a little more. And we can put some more text in here. Let's do lorem 30 instead. Yeah, so I think that's fine. Maybe we can narrow that space a bit, so MY4 or maybe MY5. Just experimenting a little bit. Okay, so yeah, I think that's pretty much it. You can see I did make it smaller. I think it looks better like this, and I think this page is actually zoomed in. Let's do, yeah, it was at 110%. So it's just an example of an inner page, and if we make it smaller, so I mean it looks decent. We might want to separate these cards. So what we could do is on the card we could do let's say, actually let's just do the middle one. There's so many different ways you can do it. We can do MY3 maybe. Yep, just add some space in between them. Cool. And the link, this should go, and this also should go to index.html because we should be able to get back. So let's change the logo link to index.html. And let's change home to index.html. Okay. And then if I click home here, it doesn't do anything. But what I want it to do is make it go all the way up if we're on the home page. So let's go to index.html, and there's a few ways we could do it. Right now it's going to # home, so we could put on the body tag an ID of home, but we should also just be able to do the $, and if we're down here and we click it, it'll bring us all the way up. So you can do it like that as well, which is probably a better way than adding an ID. But yeah, that should do it. So I think that this looks pretty good. It's nice and clean. We have an inner page just for, an example if you want to create some inner pages. We have our little slider going. We have our count up, or our increment when we come to the page, some background images. So all in all, I think it's a pretty good project. So that's it. I will see you in the next one.